Good morning, Warriors. Today is Friday, January 16th, 2026. Welcome to the Morning Adrenaline. It is time to wake up the warrior. Now, let me ask you something before we start rolling today. What if the thing holding you back from accomplishing everything you want in life is not a lack of discipline, but an addiction you've never been able to put a name on? It's not something dramatic, definitely not something that's obvious to you, and certainly not something that you would admit out loud. One of the biggest restraint on your life are the ones that feel the most normal. Because most people hear the word addiction and they think destruction, like drugs, sex, and alcohol. But today we're talking about a different category entirely. The quiet kind, the kind that never gets identified as an addiction. And these are what I call silent addictions. The addictions that comfort you. They feel like relief. Addictions that relieve you from responsibility. The addictions that make you say out loud, this is just the way that I am. The ones nobody warns you about because almost everybody actually has them. And the ones that quietly run your life while convincing you that you're in control. So here's the good news. Before we're done today, I'm going to show you how to break their grip. But first, you need to be able to see them clearly. Now, here's where this gets uncomfortable. Silent addictions don't announce themselves. They embed themselves. They don't ask permission. They don't show up as emergencies. They slowly integrate into your daily life. And the reason most people never fight them is simple. You benefit from them, at least emotionally. Comfort protects you from pressure. Pleasure protects you from discomfort, and procrastination protects you from responsibility. Every silent addiction offers relief and demands absolutely nothing in return until years pass, until opportunities close, until your standards quietly lower. And by the time you realize something's wrong, it doesn't feel like an addiction. It feels like who you are. That is the danger. Because now growth isn't just hard, it feels like betrayal of the self that you have built. Now, fair warning, you might be walking in that place right now. Actually, let me correct that. You're likely walking in that place right now with at least one of the silent addictions that we're going to discuss today. So let me lead into the question of the day. If no one was watching, no one was judging, and no one would ever know, how different would your daily discipline actually be? How hard would you really work? How focused would you really be? How intentional would you really live? Because the gap between who you are alone and who you are observed reveals what's actually in control. And here's why this question matters. Silent addictions don't need witnesses. They thrive in privacy. They operate when no one's clapping, correcting, or checking in. They decide how you behave when discipline is optional. So let's move from awareness now to practice. There are 6 silent addictions that quietly govern most people's lives. And they don't scream, they don't destroy you overnight, and they don't feel dangerous to you right now. But they set the ceiling on your effort, your faith, and your future. And once you see them, you'll start recognizing their fingerprints are everywhere. So let's start with one that makes all others possible. The first addiction is the addiction of comfort. Comfort doesn't feel dangerous because it doesn't hurt you. It just simply sedates you. It quiets your urgency. It smooths all resistance, and it convinces you that staying the same is reasonable. Your nervous system loves it. Your brain is wired to avoid discomfort because discomfort once meant danger. And in this case, past danger means current danger if you ever step out of your comfort zone again. So when you choose comfort, your body rewards you with relief. But if you have relief, you can absolutely never grow. Comfort trains your nervous system to avoid resistance, and resistance is where strength is built. You see this addiction show up when you choose convenience over challenge. You negotiate your own standards downward. You stop doing hard things unless you're forced. Comfort removes the incentive to become more. After all, listen, if your life is comfortable, why would you change? If nothing hurts, why would you grow? If survival is easy, why would you choose purpose? So here's what matters. Research consistently shows that people who intentionally step outside of their comfort zone experience greater motivation, higher engagement, and stronger long-term growth than those who prioritize comfort and ease. In other words, discomfort isn't the obstacle, it's the catalyst. It kills your urgency, and urgency is the engine of transformation. No urgency means no pressure. No pressure means no demand. No demand means you don't have discipline. A comfortable person rarely becomes disciplined, not because they can't, but because nothing is ever asking them to. And that's why comfort is the gateway to all other addictions. Because once comfort becomes the priority, every other silent addiction suddenly makes sense. Now, let's pivot and talk about the addiction that hides behind the phrase, I deserve this. And we're talking about pleasure. Pleasure is immediate. Purpose is delayed. Pleasure asks nothing. Purpose demands everything. And the nervous system will always choose the faster reward unless it's trained otherwise. When pleasure becomes your regulator, you stop asking what must be done and you start asking things like, what do I feel like? The moment feeling leads, discipline collapses. Now, this addiction shows up as constant escape, scrolling, snacking, binging, consuming. And because life is hard, but because discomfort feels intolerable. Modern research shows that repeated exposure to easy pleasure, especially like digital and food-based rewards, it dulls your dopamine and the sensitivity to your dopamine over time. That means the same activity produces less satisfaction, requiring more stimulation to feel the same amount of relief later on. That's the exact same tolerance pattern seen in substance addiction. So what starts as a break becomes a habit. What starts as a habit becomes a dependency. So pleasure doesn't just distract you, it replaces your purpose. So instead of asking what will build you, you ask what will soothe you. Instead of choosing effort, you choose escape. And over time, your capacity for discomfort shrinks, which means your capacity for growth shrinks with it. Folks, that's not preference, that's conditioning. And a conditioned man doesn't choose his future, he reacts to his cravings. You too, ladies. Now, procrastination is next. And this one pretends to be patience. Have you ever noticed that? Procrastination isn't about time. It's about fear. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of being seen, fear of being responsible. Procrastination gives you temporary relief by delaying discomfort. You feel better when you delay, so you delay again. That relief reinforces the behavior just like a drug does. You stay busy, You plan endlessly. You're always getting ready, but you don't actually move. Procrastination protects your identity from being tested. As long as you don't act, you don't have to face who you really are. And an untested identity stays weak. Laziness comes next. Number 4, and this one gets mislabeled more often than anything else. Because laziness is not a lack of desire, it's a refusal to apply effort. So procrastination delays action, but laziness avoids effort altogether. Laziness says, I do the minimum required to get by. So this addiction shows up when average starts to feel acceptable to you, when discipline feels extreme, or you negotiate effort before you ever begin. Rest is intentional. Laziness is your default. And the danger of laziness isn't that nothing gets done, it's that less and less gets done over time. See, laziness lowers your tolerance for effort. What used to feel normal now feels hard. What used to feel hard now feels unreasonable. Eventually, discipline feels unnatural, and ease feels earned, even when it's not. So a person who avoids effort long enough starts to believe effort isn't who they are. That's not a personality trait, by the way. That's an addiction to ease. Now, distraction, number 5, is the addiction that nobody thinks they have. Listen closely. Here it comes. Because everyone has it. Your attention is constantly under attack. Notifications, feeds, alerts, noise. Distraction doesn't overwhelm you, it fragments you. You can't focus without checking something. Silence makes you restless. Stillness feels wrong. And that's the tell. When you can't be still, it's not because life is loud, it's because your mind is undisciplined. Distraction doesn't just steal time, it erodes depth. It weakens your ability to think clearly, plan long term, and sit with your own thoughts. And without depth, nothing meaningful gets built. See, your distracted mind, and you've probably noticed this, can stay very busy, but it cannot become dangerous. And then the last, finally, the addiction that fractures, let's use fractures. The addiction that fractures identity more than any other, and that is approval. We talked about this last week during the High Value Human series. In fact, we talked about a lot of this stuff, but this one was key last week. Approval addiction teaches you to outsource your self-worth. Remember I said tribalism is the breeding ground for groupthink? This is where you edit yourself. You soften truth. You avoid conflict. You trade integrity for acceptance and call it being easygoing. Over time, you don't become more flexible. You become divided. One version of you in private, another in public, another one online. Nobody actually knows who you are. And a divided identity cannot move forward with force. Your confidence erodes, your clarity fades, and your conviction weakens. Not because you lack ability, but because you've handed authority over to those other people that are controlling who you are, your mind, your thoughts, your emotions. Now, here's the truth. None of these addictions are actually the problem. Comfort, pleasure, procrastination, laziness, distraction, and approval. They're all symptoms. And they're symptoms of an identity that hasn't been fully installed yet. Because when your identity is clear, behavior doesn't need to be negotiated. You don't debate discipline. You don't argue with purpose. You don't bargain with comfort. You act because it's who you are. See, most people try to solve addiction at the behavior level. They think more willpower will work, more motivation, more rules, but it never lasts because behavior without identity collapses under pressure. Guys, you don't eliminate addictions by resisting them. You eliminate them by outgrowing them. And this is where most systems fail and where Sisu Vita is different. We are not about hype. It's not about pushing harder. It's not about white knuckling discipline. The mind shifting sessions are designed to rewire your identity at the subconscious level. That's where comfort loses its authority. That's where pleasure stops negotiating. That's where procrastination, distraction, approval, even the nastiest of addictions, drugs and alcohol, lose their grip. Not because you're fighting them, but because they no longer align with who you are as a person, how you see yourself. Now, our Sisu Vita roadmaps give structure to that identity. They remove guesswork from the process. They remove friction. They remove anything that makes you hesitate to move forward because you actually have a step-by-step process to do it. They remove the internal resistance that keeps most people stuck in the word almost. Action stops being forced, discipline becomes automatic, and consistency becomes your norm. Listen, that is permanent transformation in what it looks like, not temporary effort leading to temporary results. So here's the standard to leave with today. If something in your life repeatedly pulls you away from growth, it's not harmless, it's not neutral, it's not just how you are. It's an addiction, and it only survives as long as you allow it. If you raise the standard of who you are, addictions won't survive in your life. And that's responsibility, that's stewardship, and that's how high-value humans are built. Work your body, feed your mind, build your soul, wake up the warrior. We'll see you guys next week.
Stuck in your mind, fighting shadows of a story you left behind.